Good morning, everyone. I'm so excited to be here. Oh my goodness. Welcome, welcome, welcome to Charlotte. Welcome to GEO. On behalf of GEO's Conference Host Committee, I welcome you to our Learning Conference, hosted in partnership with the North Carolina Network of Grantmakers. My name is Stephanie Cooper-Luter, and I have the privilege of serving as the Executive Vice President of the Kate B. Reynolds Charitable Trust, woohoo, in Winston-Salem. As you can tell, I'm here with my team of amazing colleagues from the Trust, Chanel, Dr. Kristen, and Madison. And I'm also proud to be here as one of GEO's Change Leaders in Philanthropy Fellows. Yay! A special shout out to all the fellows in the room, and especially the best cohort of all, Cohort 5. As co-chair of the host committee, along with my colleague Valerie Stewart of the Blue Cross Blue Shield of North Carolina Foundation, and on behalf of our entire host committee, representing you all 29 regional and national foundations, I proudly welcome you to Charlotte and the beautiful Carolinas, where I have now lived for the past 25 years. That's a quarter of a century. Prior to moving to Winston-Salem in June 2020 to join the Kate B. Reynolds Charitable Trust, I lived and worked in Charlotte for 2 years as the inaugural executive director of a county-wide initiative focused on economic mobility called Leading on Opportunity. So personally, I couldn't be prouder to welcome everyone to this beautiful Queen City, a place where my family and I once considered home. For those of you that have been following my family story a little bit, I had my son in South Carolina. He was a middle schooler in Charlotte, and I am proud to share he is now 17, almost 18, graduating Wednesday from the Forsyth Tech Early College Program with an associate's degree and is headed to NC State. Woohoo! As we gather here today, I want to pause and honor the indigenous communities across the state, the original native caretakers of this land that we inhabit. I also honor those representing the African and Caribbean diaspora for their deep, lasting contributions to this region, along with other immigrant communities who labor here. Be sure to check out the full land and labor acknowledgement found in the GEO Conference app that highlights our local history, like the once thriving Brooklyn neighborhood known as the Black Wall Street here in Charlotte, and much more. I cannot think of a more important time for GEO to gather us here in North Carolina. Since Hurricane Helene ravaged devastation in western North Carolina last year, our nonprofit and philanthropic community has stood together, continuing to respond in ongoing recovery efforts. Your presence and financial investment in North Carolina lets our impacted community know you are not rebuilding alone. It is often said that a rising tide lifts all boats, but unfortunately, not everyone here is rising. As a social worker, PhD researcher, executive, and philanthropist for 16 years, I know far too many examples from data, stories, and most importantly, lived experiences of those who struggle in the places they live to achieve this American dream. Place matters. It shapes who we become. Where a child is born, their race, ethnicity, gender, or zip code should not predict their outcomes in life. Unfortunately, data show the deepest disparities in health, education, and economic outcomes exist by race and place. And so, in our work at the Trust, we stand firm in our mission to advance equitable opportunities for every North Carolinian, regardless of race, income, or place. And we commit to equity and center racial equity in all we do. Now, given the current context of this political climate, gathering together to learn is extremely important. In the past few months, we have seen unprecedented attacks on the safety net, on health, democracy, education, the humanities, public media, the nonprofit sector, on communities we serve, Black, Indigenous, brown and white, on diversity, equity, and inclusion. I believe this is a time for us and our field to be courageous. Equitable systems change requires that everyone takes collective action through reflection, truth-telling, radical healing, and transformation. Philanthropy must stand and act alongside families experiencing poverty, with communities of color, with Indigenous and immigrant communities, to ensure a stronger, more equitable tomorrow. The Trust is a proud sponsor of GEO's Learning Conference, in large part because of GEO's unwavering commitment to center equity. Philanthropy at its heart, by definition, represents the love of humanity. I challenge all of us to consider how we as a field will utilize the love we hold to disrupt the systems of power that continue to unjustly leave some communities behind. Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King once wrote, "Power at its best is love implementing the demands of justice. And justice at its best is correcting everything that stands against love." May we continue in our field courageously together in our quest towards justice, equity, and love. I now welcome Christina Wirtz, Vice President of External Affairs at GEO, to the stage.
Hey, everybody. Thank you, Stephanie, for that powerful opening and all of your leadership on the conference. I want to extend deep gratitude to our full host committee and program committee who worked tirelessly to bring this gathering to life. And of course, to our Learning Conference sponsors, your generosity and support makes all this work possible. On behalf of the whole GEO team, welcome. We're so happy to have you here contributing to this collective space. I'm already feeling the love and warmth in the room this morning and the joy. I saw that some of y'all organized a line dancing activity last night. Like, that's what I love about GEO. We're having a good time. Thank you. If there's not dancing at the Revolution, I do not want to be there. I encourage you to continue to bring that joy and love and curiosity, vulnerability, and openness to the rest of the conference. As we navigate these extremely challenging times, I want to make very clear right now that GEO is loudly and proudly retaining our commitment to racial equity. We really believe that operationalizing racial equity is the key to supporting thriving nonprofits and communities, and we'll continue to advance a culture and a practice of philanthropy that addresses all the intersecting systems of oppression that our communities are facing. It's our job at GEO to create a professional home base where grant makers are supported and challenged to deepen a racial equity analysis that's informed by our collective histories, the complexities of our present, and our dreams for the future. And more than that, GEO's here to create space for moving from knowledge to action by equipping you all with the resources and ultimately relationships, community that you need to adopt racial equity practices in grant making. These days, these last few months have been really overwhelming, and a lot of us can be left feeling hopeless, powerless. And I want to remind you that there is a lot of power in this room and a lot of power in philanthropy. It's been so heartening to see all the steps that members of the GEO community are taking to respond to attacks on nonprofits. You all are showing up. Over the course of the Learning Conference, I really invite you to listen for the practical and tactical ways that our colleagues across philanthropy are showing up and stepping up for our communities. And I hope that you leave here with renewed resolve, concrete ideas, and the relationships you need to make some moves. GEO's here to support philanthropy in being responsive, connected, and creative in the face of uncertainty. And honestly, who better to do that than those of you that are working in learning and evaluation functions in your organization? While some learning teams are being downsized and equity-based evaluation work is under attack, we believe that your functions are essential for stability in uncertain times. It's you all that help us understand what's working, what's not working, and how we can adapt to better serve our communities. So please keep going. We're here for you. We're excited to bring you all together. As GEO's president, Marcus Ralton, wrote in his welcome letter, coming together in moments characterized by complexity empowers us to tap into the collective genius of the whole. And that's what we're doing here for the next few days. Tomorrow, my colleagues, Akilah and Marcus, will be up here for a Q&A session. I really encourage you to use the conference app to submit your questions. They want to hear what's on your minds. They want to hear what's on your hearts. 2 quick housekeeping notes. Please remember, I'm not doing it, please remember to wear your badges at all times. Don't be like me. That helps us maintain security and build community. And if you need immediate assistance, please look for any GEO staff member. We're all wearing really big orange buttons, and you can find us. And finally, I want to acknowledge something special about this gathering. While GEO is a national organization, we really believe in the importance of being rooted in place, in real communities with real histories, real challenges, and ultimately real lessons for us all. That's why we're honored to partner with the North Carolina Network of Grantmakers to host this conference. And it's my pleasure to introduce my old friend, PSO OG, Sarah Mann Wilcox, Executive Director of North Carolina Network of Grantmakers. I did it! I tried.
Well, hey, y'all. We're so happy to have you in North Carolina. What a gift. I am Sarah Mann Wilcox from the North Carolina Network of Grantmakers. I've been there for a minute. And by that, I mean 11 and a half years, which means that I have been a certified GEO fangirl for a really long time. And they've been such wonderful partners and have been so thoughtful about honoring our state and about understanding what makes North Carolina special. And we've got a lot of North Carolina folks here today, so I'm glad that we have a lot of representation. You can tell from the agenda all of the ways they are carefully honoring North Carolina and all the things that are going on in our state, because it has been a rough year, y'all. We had a big old hurricane, and we're used to having them in the eastern part of our state, and it's devastating when it happens there, but we were not prepared for what happened in western North Carolina. And I have been so proud of philanthropy and the way they stepped up and the way they thought about their practices, and they learned in real time, and they changed what the community needed, and it was wild, y'all. It was crazy. The large statewide philanthropy organizations were giving to smaller ones on the ground in a trust-based fashion that I have never seen in all of my career. It was so cool. And so much of what, agreed. And so much of that, so much of the things that has made that response so remarkable are the kinds of lessons that we are learning in spaces like this. We have very strange job, you guys. We're squishy humans trying to do this job where there are some rules, but most of them we kind of made up on our own. And how do you even explain what we do for a living to lay people? I tried to explain it to the guy who did my tattoo Friday, and it took me 45 minutes. I was like, well, there's this, anyways, we get it here, right? We understand in this room, we understand what it is to do this work and do it equitably and do it meaningfully. I'm really very happy. I'm totally getting off track here. See, I'm proud of NCG. Okay, squishy humans. Okay, that's what I have to say. We're glad you're here. We're really glad you're here. And we're glad you're doing this work, and it's just a lot of fun to have you here. So now, because you don't want to hear me babble on, we get to hear from 3 really remarkable North Carolina leaders. They are going to share their strategies that help support grassroots and community-led efforts that are bringing the kind of resiliency and stability that we need here, but we really need everywhere as we manage all of the things that are happening currently. So first, we're going to hear from Hannah Hassan. She's an author, poet, storyteller, playwright, founder of Epic Tribe, and she uses stories to help people connect to social justice issues and to really build community. And then we'll hear from Yesenia Cuello, who's the executive director of NC Field, literally has been advocating and organizes since she was a teenager and has been empowering farm workers in Eastern North Carolina. And finally, Lamisha Whittington, who is a powerhouse of an environmental justice advocate, writer, lecturer. She's a fierce protector of the environment in North Carolina. And fun fact, a Celtic fiddle player like myself will have a jam session later. So please join me in welcoming these remarkable leaders to hear from them this morning.
Good morning. I have spent many a day questioning her future, calling her out and calling her in. I have publicly challenged her choices, criticized her politically, charged her to do better. We have a complicated relationship, and ultimately, it's because I love her and want her to win. I believe in her. I believe in the possibility of what she can become. She is beautiful now, but that beauty is often a mirage. She is powerful to many, but those within the inner circle acknowledge the facade, know what's under, beneath the facade, know what's under, beneath the surface, in the ground, her roots. We see her secrets, and yet we still love her despite the difficulties of her truths, for she is our Charlotte. The city that has opened herself to give us the place that we call home. We have found a sanctuary within her borders. This is where we build our legacy and our memories, where we deepen our connections and find spaces to grow and belong. And because she is ours, we have earned the right to challenge her and demand her growth. Because she belongs to us, we will hold her to higher standards. We want a city that raises the bar and breaks the mold, opens its arms with opportunity and hope, creates spaces for the most vulnerable within her city to heal and cope. And there is no denying that there is an abundance of love here, an overpowering belief in the future of this place. There are people who make it easy to love here, people who have opened their homes and their hearts, people who continuously keep and hold space, for this is our city. The place that we will keep fighting for, the place that we will continue to build. This is our city, home to some of the most beautiful and interesting spaces, a city that makes you feel hope, a city that encourages you to dream, a city that is promising and passionate, a city that gives you space to believe, and that's how love works. That's what loving Charlotte means, is examining the truth of her history and working towards an uplifting legacy. That is where we see her light, and that is where we see her beauty. It is nestled in the details, hidden in the open spaces. It's seen in the nighttime, that beautiful skyline. It is within those who have given to her for multiple generations. For how can we discuss the beauty of Charlotte and not honor her natives and the ancestors and elders who have built a foundation? For a city that honors where she is grown from is a city prepared for future greatness. And as for me, I only want to live in a city, grow and build in a city, love in a city that is willing to do the absolute most to ensure that all living here are living up to their God-given potential. I only want to claim a city, stamp me and my family's last name to a city that chases freedom and equality in a way that is monumental, for this is a city that holds on to the ability to transform the way that we live with radical love. This is a city that holds on to the ability to push far past minimal expectations and to be even more amazing than the things that our wildest dreams are made of. Our Charlotte, a city with an abundance of raw talent, with fresh concepts and new ideas of inspirational work to be done. Charlotte is beautiful. She's so very beautiful, not solely for what she is or has been, but Charlotte is beautiful for who she is destined to become. Good morning. Oh, that's lovely. Good morning. Welcome to Charlotte. Oh, welcome to Charlotte. That's how love works in Charlotte. We give it out, y'all give it back. That's what we'll be doing over the next couple of days, okay? All right, so my name is Hannah Hassan, and as referenced before, I'm a poet, a writer. I'm the co-founder of Epic Tribe, my company. We put real stories of real people from within our communities on stages. So I guess it felt right that a poet and a teller of stories would be here to tell you a little bit about the Charlotte story. Some years ago, I think it was maybe 2018, I was at an event, and a prominent Charlotte pastor came up to me and asked me if he could ask me a question and record the answer with his phone. The question was, what makes Charlotte beautiful to you? He explained that he was working on a project to ask Charlotteans to think about the beauty of the city and to answer that simple question, what makes Charlotte beautiful to you? And I told him that I would answer, but I needed some time because I wanted to do it in poem form. And he said, okay. And he said, well, let me tell you a little bit about some of the answers that I've already gotten. And he said, I've interviewed people from every major Charlotte space that matters. So the elected officials and the business leaders and things of that nature. And he said, they have all given me an answer that is a really important answer. And most of them gave the same answer. When I asked them what makes Charlotte beautiful, you know what they all said for the most part? I said, what, Pastor? What did they say? Trees. They said, what makes Charlotte beautiful is her tree line. And hear me out. They are not wrong. Charlotte is a gorgeous southern city. Charlotte has some of the most beautiful trees that line our streets and neighborhoods from every corner of this city. North Charlotte, South Charlotte, the east side, the west side. Charlotte has beautiful trees. The tree line, the tree tops are incredible. So personally, I go outside of my house and I grab my phone and take pictures and videos of the trees out there all the time because that's how beautiful the trees in Charlotte are. Charlotte has beautiful trees. But I wonder, when those prominent people answered that question, I wonder if they considered the roots. Did you know that trees exist in communities? That they tell stories? The rings of the trees tell the stories of the climate and the conditions that they have weathered. And then there's the roots. Oh my God, the roots of the trees. They're these intricate systems of communication. Trees communicate with each other underground through their roots. You could basically say that the roots are the community organizers. Through the roots, they share water and nutrients. They alert each other when danger is coming. And there's this phenomenon called root shock. Root shock. Root shock occurs when a tree from within a particular system is uprooted. So for some reason, if a tree is there no more, root shock happens. So maybe that tree got chopped down or fell due to a weather-related situation. Either way, when a tree is uprooted from the system, the community of trees is in shock. The community must learn how to maneuver around that loss. A new way of communicating and being with community must ensue. Charlotte has beautiful trees. A few years ago, I was commissioned to write a poem for an organization here that does important equity building work, community building initiative. And it was in 2020, where at the height of the global pandemic, they had moved their annual big event to an online situation. They commissioned me to write a poem that was centered in equity and community and that spoke to their theme, which was fault lines. And then they asked me to put that in a poem. So So I did a bit of research on fault lines, and I instantly made the connection between how fault lines are these cracks in the surface of the earth that can cause grave destruction, and then how displacement in our community, like here in Charlotte, has been destructive. It's a big part of the Charlotte story, displacement. And what is displacement but root shock? So I went to Facebook and asked my friends there to tell me the stories of communities that have experienced in the past or currently experiencing displacement here in Charlotte due to gentrification, redlining, transportation, things of that nature. And the community responded in massive numbers. That is part of how we organize here. Sometimes it's inside of space with each other, in houses, in coffee shops. Sometimes it's on Facebook, TikTok, things of that nature. But Charlotte is a relationship city, and we organize and build around our relationships. So the people gave me all of these names of these communities and neighborhoods from within Charlotte that have been displaced or are experiencing displacement, and I wrote that poem. You heard me open up with a poem, which was the answer to that pastor's question. What makes Charlotte beautiful? So I'm going to close in just a moment with a poem that honors the truth of our roots. You'll hear the names of many different Charlotte neighborhoods. This is me rooting you here in this place, helping you to understand this place. But as you hear the name of a neighborhood, and you will hear many names, I invite you to hold space for the communities from your home, wherever that might be, for the neighborhoods and pockets of people all over this city, this state, this country, this world that are currently experiencing displacement. And as you navigate the rest of your time here, may you be rooted in the understanding that what you invest in grows. May you be reminded that beautiful treetops will never be enough. Can you really know a tree if you don't understand and protect its roots? Fault lines. We have all shared the stories, spoken the words about the communities, the neighborhoods that once were Brooklyn, the people who are actively being displaced, Cherry. We harp on the memories, give love and light to their legacies. We prepare for the catastrophe that almost always comes with being erased. A fault is a fracture or disruption in the planted surface. It's where the movement and displacement occurs. A fault line holds on to the pressure. It's holding everything together until the tension becomes so great that it literally rocks the earth, causes a convulsion, an earthquake, a tsunami, a disaster of grave proportions. It's the tiny cracks that form the lines of division that create the disasters that result in disruption. And we speak their stories. Tell the tales of the people and families that once occupied this land, Catawba, Sugaree, name whole towns after them, Waxhaw, and roads and streets, Tuckasegee. We wade in their waters, Sugar Creek, have benefited from their traditions, a good old southern city where the living is easy. And we forge forward in the name of urban renewal, with trains and tracks that slice through entire neighborhoods, Optimist Park, that displace whole families and generations of people who have lived and worked there, Enderley Park. We uproot stories and history without a second thought of the experiences and memories created by the people who built their communities with creativity and care, Wilmore. And every time the people are erased, Brook Hill, families are left out in the cold, Biddleville, beneath the surface, Lockwood, beyond the visible, Smallwood, a crack is exposed. The plates begin to shift. Nature is taking its course. You cannot think that you can disregard the most vulnerable yet resilient of your city and not be met with a catastrophic force, and not come face to face with the consequences of your actions when what is in the ground can stay there no more. The people erupt, movement happens, perspective shift, cities shake, lives are changed, and earths will quake. We speak their stories, discuss with candor how they can no longer afford to live there now, Noda, and how their homes are purchased for pennies and torn down and rebuilt, First Ward, turned what meant something valuable to somebody's grandma, Greer Heights, into condos and townhomes, $500,000 bills, Seversville. Disregard the irony of stripping yet another people from their home. Another crack reveals itself from beneath the surface. Another Black community erased and displaced. Another city with a crisis of consciousness. Another neighborhood goes up for purchase. Another family out on the streets, ousted to the outskirts of the city or to the places without access. Now those who can afford it are privileged to live in the ugly houses turned to pretty. The fault lines are exposed. What a beautiful mess. We tell the stories of the city as we work for better days and respond with hope and courage. We fight injustice, but we cannot ignore the cracks that have always existed beneath the surface. And if we are to prevent greater disaster, if we are to save our communities while there is still time, we must go back to the difficult truth that exists beneath us. We must follow the stories through our roots. We must follow the stories through the fault lines. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. That was amazing. So buenos dias, good morning, everybody, and thank you for inviting me into this space. Let's get a quick show of hands. How many of us love food? Be honest. How many of us love food? All of us, right? My name is Yesenia Cuello, and it's an honor to be here with you all today. For those of you new to North Carolina, it's a pleasure to welcome you to the agricultural powerhouse, state that feeds the nation. A state that can tell you the number of hogs, but not the number of people who care for them. At the heart of this thriving industry are farm workers. All of the food we eat has been planted by, picked by, or touched by farm workers, or farm worker children, children like me. My story starts with two people who were never supposed to meet, a boxer from Santo Domingo and a ranchera from Morelos. They met in Los Angeles after traveling nearly 5,000 miles between them, that perfect series of improbable circumstances that converged to create me. When I was 4, my mother left California with my siblings and me, with nothing but the clothes on our backs and $15 in our pocket. We moved to Pink Hill, North Carolina, a town with roughly 400 people and 1 stoplight. For her, it felt a bit familiar. For me, it was a whole new world. We moved into a mobile home across from the elementary school. For a kindergartner, that meant freedom. No bus, just my feet and a sprint if I forgot my homework. I was held back that first year in kindergarten, not because I didn't know the material, but because I didn't speak the English at the same rate as my classmates. My Spanish didn't count as an asset, it was a barrier. The following year, I was pulled from nap time to tutor another Spanish-speaking student. At 6, I was able to use the very skill that had once been treated as a deficit. The same Spanish that kept me from advancing was now a lifeline for someone else. I don't remember what I taught her beyond English names of colors and shapes. I just remember how good it felt to be needed, and how strange it was to be seen as the expert in something that I had once been punished for. As children of immigrants, we exist between worlds. I wasn't always sure where I fit in. Too Mexican in some spaces, not Mexican enough in others. Too American, not American enough. That's the tension we carry. We're not fully from anywhere, but we carry our culture everywhere we go. Spanish is more than just our first language. It's our comfort, our confidence, our secret code. In middle school, we'd speak it during lunch and in hallways, finding tiny pockets of safety. It reminded us of who we are when everything else around us demanded we be something else. But even those moments were fragile. We were told to speak English, even on break, because Spanish made others uncomfortable. Our comfort caused someone else discomfort. Language wasn't just communication, it was a signal. And the one we carried from home and the one that nurtured us could just as easily be used to mark us as outsiders or even rebellious. It was a strange message to grow up with. Your language is beautiful at home, but inconvenient in public. We learned quickly not to expect our schools to understand our stories. Our parents didn't often go to parent-teaching conferences or school field trips. The letters sent home weren't written in Spanish, and even if they had been, our parents were on a farm working. Ripe vegetables and fruits wait for no one, and the work is sun up to sundown. If we got sick, we often interpreted between our parents and the doctor. My mom is my hero. In the past, my younger sisters and I asked my mom to let us go to work with her. She was gone often, leaving for work before the school bus arrived and arriving as we were getting ready for bed. We saw this as an opportunity to spend time with her, to help earn some money for clothes and school supplies, and our friends were actually there too. When we asked, the answer had always been no, until one day it wasn't. I was 14 when I started working in tobacco. I remember the first time I stepped into a field, not because I have the best memory, but because after that day, I never wanted to go back. That day has played in my head every day for as long as I can remember. We followed a van to a field with rows of tobacco that seemed to go on forever. We cut holes in trash bags and wore them over our clothes, thinking we were wearing them to protect ourselves from the dew on the tobacco plants. Not knowing that if we didn't wear them that day, our tiny bodies would be absorbing nicotine equivalent to an entire pack of cigarettes. No one explained the risks or taught us about the dangers of heat, something we as children always associated with fun or playing in the garden. The only question we were asked was, "Have you ever worked before?" We knew to say yes. There were no scheduled breaks, not enough water, sometimes just an orange cooler with dirt settled at the bottom. After that first day, I realized why my mom packed extra water for us, why we wrapped our burritos and napkins in aluminum foil, why in over 90-degree weather, my mom made us dress in jeans, tennis shoes, t-shirt, another oversized long-sleeve button-up shirt, a hat, and a scarf to keep the sun off our necks, instead of the shorts and flip-flops we had initially planned to wear. I learned very quickly we weren't there to have fun. We were there to work. And the only people we could count on to look out for us were each other. We looked out for each other for the next 3 summers. Every year we went back, the tobacco smelled the same. The plant was still sticky and rough. Our gloves and hands were covered in tar within minutes. And every year I found myself looking up at the sky, praying for a cloud to come by and provide us with a few seconds of shade from the sun beating down on every exposed part of our bodies. When most people imagine southern tobacco fields, they think of shade trees and family farmers who know your name and offer you a glass of water. This isn't our experience. We were outsiders, Spanish-speaking, brown. We weren't invited to anyone's porch. We weren't seen as part of community even though we went to the same schools and shopped at some of the same grocery stores. That's the truth. Not shared southern heritage, just labor, isolated, unprotected, mostly invisible, but still essential. I became aware of the differences before I had the vocabulary or even spoke the English language. One of my early memories is of my mom walking into a grocery store with all of us in tow. A man approached and yelled at her, pointing at the exit. At first, I felt as if we had done something wrong. Later, I would call it what it is: exclusion, injustice, racism. And like my mother, who never wavered or who stood firm on her values no matter the job or the moment, I knew giving up wasn't an option. As one of the oldest, or as I would like to say, management with no pay, I started finding my own quiet lines too, boundaries I wouldn't cross, small but steady ways I learned to stand my ground. As a teen organizer, I sat in on a policy task force meeting at the General Assembly in which adults were discussing youth tobacco prevention. We put child tobacco workers on the docket. When it got to us, the conversation started about whether children were even working in the fields. At that moment, we stood up and we said, we are those children. That was the day I realized if you don't tell your story, someone else will tell it for you, and they might erase you from it. My identity gave me a front row seat to people doing impossible things without ever calling them impossible, and it gave me a choice to look away or to confront it. When I was 17, I co-founded a movement that later became a nonprofit known as NC Field, a nonprofit created by former and current farm workers, alongside a diverse group of allies who organized to change how our communities are treated. an opportunity to write our own story, a story of resilience, not as vulnerable, but as powerful. I've been confronting it every day ever since. We built systems of care, survival, solidarity. The formal systems failed us, or maybe they anticipated us and erected barriers to try and hold us in place. Everyone should know sometimes the leaders we need don't rise through institutions, we rise in spite of them. We built systems that don't rely on a government who made it clear decades ago, my community is good enough to harvest your food, but not good enough for a social safety net, accessible health care, or equal opportunity. In 2019, I found myself asking, is philanthropy good? Especially when it has profited from, pacified, or silenced communities like mine. When funding arrives, it's often prescriptive, conditional, focused on deliverables versus dignity, but I've also seen what it looks like when philanthropy gets it right. Funding rooted in trust, partnerships where funders say, ask for what you need and mean it. Not photo ops, but true solidarity. So I'm asking you today, not for a favor, but for a shift. When you fund food systems, climate, health, education, labor, policy, philanthropy, ask the questions my community needs most. What about the farm workers? This looks like opening wallets in your networks, your influence, your imagination, your eyes. Get to know the community you're investing in. Always be curious and brave. Ask those hard questions. Why is it the people who harvest our nation's fruits and vegetables can't afford to go to the grocery store and purchase it themselves? A farm worker earns just 45 cents for every 40-pound bucket of sweet potato they harvest. In a day, to earn the equivalent to minimum wage in North Carolina, they would have to harvest almost 2 tons of sweet potato. Why is it that the legal age to purchase cigarettes is 21, yet a child as young as 12 can legally work in a tobacco field? Under the Fair Labor Standards Act, child labor protections specifically exclude agriculture, allowing children to work legally in one of the top 3 most dangerous industries in the nation. In the US, an estimated 400,000 to 500,000 children work in agriculture. It's the only industry where kids as young as 12 can legally work long hours in dangerous conditions. Every 3 days, a child dies from a farm-related incident. Every day, 33 more are injured. And still, this labor is allowed because it's feeding the rest of the country. Why is a rural emergency room often the only option for medical care? When clinic doors close at 6 p.m. and operate only on weekdays, it excludes not just farm workers, but many rural workers who can't afford to miss a day of work to prioritize their health. How does a migrant farm worker take care of their health when they were never given the actual address of their housing? During the pandemic, I found myself on phone calls early in the morning with emergency services, guiding them in order to find farm workers. Later to figure out that there wasn't an address and that the farm workers may not have one. Federal and state laws do not require a 911 address, a U.S. Postal Service registration. Mailboxes are not required for migrant farm worker housing locations. Recovery can't happen if you don't know where people are. So what happens to the migrant workforce before, during, and after a hurricane? Childbirth-related fatalities. Our mothers and their unborn children paying the ultimate price, punished by a system that now more than ever treats their very existence as a threat. Under changing enforcement policies, even a hospital bed isn't a place of safety. It's a potential checkpoint. True dignity means putting decision-making power where the solution already lives, in the community. This is not about charity, it's about justice. Today is not about pointing the finger at what we have or haven't done, but rather recommitting to the purpose of philanthropy, which is to listen, to learn, and to create a more just society for all people. If your grant making doesn't center those closest to the pain and most impacted, then it's missing the point. If your measures of success don't reflect our reality, I can't tell you who was at your table, but I can tell you who wasn't. And like the berries on your plate this morning, picked perhaps by the men, women, and children from my community, we all have a role to play in protecting our systems, our food systems' integrity. That starts with the people who plant, pick, and process our food. Our agricultural workforce are people worthy of dignity and respect, and that will remain true until justice finally catches up with us. I'd like you to take one last minute to look around the room. Your presence here today is no accident. It's part of something bigger. If we love food, we should care about farm workers. At NC Field, we believe that in order to create a legacy where our community thrives, we need to start in our own communities. Each of us is planting seeds, whether we realize it or not. So I invite you to ask yourself, what kind of seed are you planting? Some may not bloom in our lifetime, but that doesn't make them any less worthy. The next time you fund food systems, climate change, labor rights, education, or rural health, remember to ask, what about the farm workers? Because if you don't, no one else will. The future we hope for depends on the seeds we choose to sow today. Thank you very much.
Good morning. Oh, my sisters. My sisters, my sisters, my sisters. And I do not use that lightly. Oh, have mercy. Oh, have mercy. They have ushered in the ancestors. They have welcomed, as I will do the same, each of you to North Carolina and welcoming in our family that's already from North Carolina into this space. But I am humbled and honored to be in a lineup of powerful leaders and matriarchs, both stirred by the words of Yesenia and the legacy of her people, the fact that the very fruit on our table may be from the hands of her family or folks that she supported. Hannah, have mercy, bless you for telling authentic and true stories about us in a time today where our stories are misconstrued, manipulated, and placed in a vacuum to silo us. And when you said the treetops, it was so interesting. Then I'm going to get to my speech, y'all, I promise. It was the first time yesterday I was on the 25th floor. I felt like the Jeffersons. Y'all know the Jeffersons, right? Moving on up, baby, to the east side. In a high rise, all right, penthouse. I was up on the 25th floor. I said, Lord, look at the elevation. When you get elevated, you can see the treetops. Because I didn't know Charlotte looked that green. I said, what am I looking at? Is this the mountains, as I saw it in the background? It kind of looks like Central Park a little bit. I was shocked. So when you said that, you know, if I'd have heard that the day before, I said, nah, because I've only used to being on ground level. But having a higher view, having the access to have higher views, means that you can see a different perspective. So I appreciate you grounding why I saw that perspective, and then not just the tops, but the roots. I appreciate you. Hashi squarelalo, gagavabanangug, hashononorut, taro. Mum yak radiate toro rut. Ainundud mum yak. Mumotarash she rut ea rut tadash. Giving honor as an Afro-Indigenous woman of Western North Carolina, the original Muskogee Creek Nation that has since had to rebuild in the face of gentrification and desolation, not just from the Indigenous Holocaust, not just from slavery, but as recent as Hurricane Helene. Erased, or at least they attempted to, but here I stand. A descendant of the Kingdom of the Happy Land. If you're not familiar, I encourage you to look into the first royal settlement in United States history after emancipation, and the second kingdom being Kingdom of Hawaii. And even though our kingdoms were destroyed, our legacy continues through the descendants. And our commitment to uplifting the people, because there is no kingdom, just like there's no democracy, without the people. My name is Professor Lameshia Whittington. The streets call me LA. All right? I had to remember I had to get dressed up today because I'm usually in the community, okay? I'm usually in the community. As a professor, I understand that's my title, but it's not who I'm accountable to. It's not who made me and pulled the breath out and in my chest in order to make sure that I was effective for my community. But it is the title I hold to reach students that are coming from the same backgrounds or being introduced to new backgrounds. I am also a program consultant with Amplify Fund. We'll get to my role there. And a proud co-founder and president of the board of Democracy Green, the nation's first Afro-Indigenous-led environmental and climate justice conservation org with a disaster relief, response, recovery, and mutual aid arm. My life has been an assortment of intersectionality, so I call myself an intersectionalist. Why? Is because the beauty, the creativity, the love coming from a legacy of agriculture, coming from a legacy of blue-collar workers and folks who prayed and lived and loved and thrived, but also the intersection of cumulative impact. When we saw railroads being built in order to displace our communities and having to hide from the uprisings of the KKK, the pain and the cumulative impact of Jim Crow, the pain and the cumulative impact of these corporations and these polluted vested interests in our communities, we also we're forced to live in the intersection, and that's what I'm asking you to do, is to step with me in the intersection. You see, the opposition doesn't mind living in the intersection. They just don't want us to live in the intersection. They don't mind corporations being funded that give money to politicians. Oh, that can work. That partnership works. They don't mind certain funders giving funds to Project 2025 and then it being incorporated by an administration. Wait a minute. I thought they were all separate. They're not. And so we must live in the intersection in order to survive. I recall when I was 6 years old, my mother, a rural homemaker, decided to speak out at a town hall against an environmental corporation that threatened to come into our predominantly black home and landowner community. And she said, I'm going to go and speak out. And I said, oh. As a child, I was like, what does that mean? What does that look like? And I remember seeing my mother standing at a podium, similar to here, except she's on the ground, speaking to elected officials, and I remember her being on camera. And she spoke out, do not bring this corporation to our community. My children deserve clean air. And when I saw her on TV, I said, that's what I'm going to do. It's done. And when our elected officials voted against the corporation and they won, I said, oh, that's the power. That's the power. And I knew from there that was the moment. 2 years later, I unfortunately in elementary school was called the N-word for the first time by who I thought were friends. Was cut in the face with a piece of shingle and then pushed down into the playground, which I thought was my safe space, thinking that I was going to die. I remember my mother rubbing cocoa butter on my face every night, and the smell evokes that memory of her making sure her baby didn't have the scar of racism. This was the 1990s, y'all. Not 1954, not 1964. And so it etched in within me a moment of just pain and memory, but also resiliency. And then years later, at the age of 14, and my brother was 7 years old, a co-founder of Democracy Green as well, and he's here today, Rob. We're classically trained violinists, and as Sarah mentioned, Celtic musicians, and you better believe I'm taking you up on that offer, Sarah. That's done. We jigging. We jigging. Okay? Y'all don't need to see all that. I'm sorry. Y'all don't need to see all that. But as Celtic musicians, because that's a part of our heritage, long history, y'all, we as children were hired, commissioned by a nonprofit to play music, to expose preschool-aged children to the love of the arts. That was my first nonprofit job, y'all. And I got paid. It was nice, okay? And from there, 2 years later, I was elected as the youngest community college SGA president at the time of age 16. And because of that exposure in academia, I was hired to work for marketing on my first political campaign, House of Representatives, in which we won. I did it again 2 years later. We won again. 2 years after that, I was hired as an intern for my first foundation job, 4-H. Anybody know any 4-H's? That's what I'm talking about, baby. I was a state president, you know what I'm saying? So I bleed green, okay? I bleed green. And they hired me as an intern. I was like, oh, I like this, and I built out their digital plan. And then the next year, I co-founded my first nonprofit. I had no idea that this led me on the journey of 20 years of this intersectional back and forth from academia to being in funder spaces to nonprofit advocacy to being in resilient spaces and community. It was over and over, and I kind of felt like, well, why am I holding all of this? Why is my family and communities having to hold all this intersectional labor? And then it made sense. It made sense, y'all. And so I'm going to share with you very briefly a story of an organization and a funder who believed in that organization. And it will answer the question that I've been tasked with today is how do we fund in that intersection? What is the urgency of now and how do we do it? It's been done. And we must continue and be bold in that continuous. And there was this organization, a small volunteer-led group that were just practitioners and activists from rural communities from eastern North Carolina to western North Carolina, and they came together as friends and comrades in the face of Hurricane Florence. Communities called upon them saying, folks don't know where we are. The National Guard can't locate us on dirt roads and we're stranded. But we can connect with you because you're our brothers, our cousins, our sisters. And so this organization of volunteers coordinated water and land rescues and rescued 250 people out of rising floodwaters. But the movement continued. This volunteer group began to conduct press conferences and working with impacted communities to raise their voices in political halls to demand rainy day funds. And then that same volunteer group went back into community and hold out homes to make sure people could come back to a place of refuge. But while that organization was wading in troubled waters, they realized they were wading in PFAS-contaminated waters. And they realized our volunteer effort must be an organization, because if we didn't know that there was contamination that's now our livestock are drinking, that's in our well water, we don't even know how to test it, our people may not know. That's what the organization said. And so they formalized this organization, pulling together their own coins and dollars, but still volunteer-led. And they began to meet partners, and they created the state's first town hall on PFAS. They then filed a legal petition with the help of a national organization, and with co-petitioners, they filed a legal petition to the EPA under the first Trump administration to call for health effect studies data to prove that there was a health impact from drinking this water, and the petition was denied. But standing strong and dauntless, this organization refiled that petition under the Biden administration and the Reagan EPA, and it was approved, changing the course of drinking water standards across the nation. And then there was a funder they were introduced to called Amplify Fund. Oh, hey, Renata, hey, girl. It's my boo right there. An Amplify Fund was introduced. They were outside of North Carolina. So folks within North Carolina weren't really familiar, but this organization was introduced, a relatively small but mighty, volunteer-led, zero-budget organization. Amplify said, we will give you your first grant of $30,000. And this organization took that $30,000 with gratitude, and they hired their first executive director, a longstanding co-founder and volunteer of the org. They were able to give small contracts to actual people within the communities to build this movement, and from there they created the nation's first environmental justice and landfill and PFAS research that was incorporated in the nation's first CDC clinical guidelines by the National Academies of Sciences, published now and used by health departments across the nation. They were quoted by the White House when the drinking water standards for PFAS was created for the first time and instituted. Well, because Amplify Fund, this organization was introduced to other funders. Networks created, trainings to help them skill up their conversation, and because of that, 4 and 5 more funders said, I'm going to invest. And with that expanded investment, this organization built a water quality lead testing and PFAS program where they went into community and they taught the state how to go in, educate community, and test households, churches. And they did over 500 households within 2 years because of that support. And from doing that, they changed the course of state policy and the roadmap on PFAS. This organization, small but mighty, stood up, and they were able to hire and invest in community in a way they hadn't seen before. And as this movement continued to flourish, this organization was called again to Hurricane Helene. And in that moment, they launched a 37-county-wide effort. Mutual aid set up in over 10 counties. Medical appointments given for free with medical teams. Food, hot food, fixed. Feeding over 2,500 to 3,000 people every 2 weeks. And they've continued to work in that 8 months since the storm to help people rebuild and actually work with FEMA to overhaul homes. But in the process of this work of Hurricane Helene, guess what? This organization faced assault, shopping for water in order to get it to community in an emergency. A grocery store staff, 3, physically and violently assaulted 2 of the leaders of that organization. A video that is now over 4 million views viral, a fired manager, and even a police report that said assault on 2 females. But despite that physical violence and them being targeted explicitly because they dared to give aid to those most in need, the organization continued. And in the face of that atrocity, in the face of that assault, this organization, through their water program, was recommended to apply for a federal grant for the first time. They did. After helping others get a federal grant, like the town of Maysville, now they have a new water treatment center because of it. This organization applied for a community change grant and was awarded $20 million for that program. Yeah, y'all. But it wasn't federal dollars that got them there, it was funder dollars. It was the motivation of community leaders who understood the pain. And now here is the same administration that denied their original petition is attempting to deny their $20 million award. And now their fight continues. And now funder dollars and organizing and safety and security, that is what is supporting their organization to continue to carry on, because the people and the needs don't change just because the White House does. Even when the White House changes, the needs of the people do not. And so because of the belief of Amplify Fund, because of the belief of funders who saw how you give every year without a gap year, they were able to build from $0 and volunteer to being that $30,000 grant, to being able to build to a program of multiple funders that attracted actual federal grant awards to replace lead drinking pipes in unincorporated Black and brown communities. The question is, as I wind down, where do we go from here? The urgency is now. We have been preparing for this. We have spoken on the front lines. We have placed our bodies in these waiting waters, and communities are gasping in polluted air. They are drinking in contaminated water. That has not ceased, nor can our advocacy, nor can our strides to say, how can we be on the front lines in order to get us to the future? That is the call, because that organization, well, is Democracy Green. Be very clear. Yeah, save that to the end. You know what I'm saying? But there's a Democracy Green in every state. There's an NC Field in every state. Do you know them? Do you fund them? Do you follow them? Not fund the movement. Baby, we do the movements. The ancestors have told us how to move the movement. We're still here. Through Holocaust and slavery and Jim Crow and civil rights. Come on. Through gerrymandering, we are still here. And so the call to ask, as I conclude welcoming you all to North Carolina, these organizations today are under attack not by natural forces, but by the political winds of injustice. And it is funders, not federal dollars, supporting organizations such as the one in my story today, to remain on the front lines, leading the charge to our collective future. It is not about funding campaigns and catchy slogans or the policy issue of the session. It is about funding the people and the organizations who sustain community and create the movements. So I say to you, now is the time to act. If not now, when? If not you, who? Grassroots organizations and the communities they serve, as I've already said, are drowning in polluted water, and they need more than our applause. They need our unrelenting, unceasing, and unwavering support in the face of adversity. So you must fund boldly, fund flexibly, fund relationally. You must fund with the urgency of now to save our very democracy, because it means people. And so evaluate not just policy shifts, but how safe your grantees feel. Ask not just what your dollars are producing, but who they are protecting. How protected are they in the era of surveillance, violence, and political suppression? Be the wind to carry them. Be the shelter when they are hunted. Be the fire that burns through bureaucracy and fear. Because again, there are many of us across the states that were invisible until an Amplify Fund lifted us up. Do you know them? Find them, fund them, follow them, and be ready to stand in your role on the front lines to secure our collective future. And let's burn the good fire.